Hello and welcome to the Comic Literate podcast, the podcast that deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, mangas, penny dreadfuls, web comics, newspaper comics, essentially any single frame illustrations where the characters use bubbles to talk or think. I am the soon-to-be known as Comic Stan, but real name Ryan, obviously. I'm the comic part of the Comic Literate in the sense that I once listened to an audiobook of The Watchmen, so I think that's my credentials for that part. And with me, as always, is the literate part of the Comic Literate podcast in the sense that he's the one of the two of us that can read. It's Jamie.
Hello, I've read a book.
I mean, two at least. Come on.
I've read a couple in my time.
I swear you told me you had a degree or something.
I was a fucking librarian.
Okay. Does that mean did you get high on your own supply there, or how's that
it was incredible. I used to have I shouldn't be talking about this. I used to have my own.
Do we need to make a space in case we need to edit anything out?
No, I was a library manager, right? And I used to have a little back office, and I would spend like 3 maybe hours a day in the back office. I'm going to pull up some air quotes now. Vetting books.
Those are quotes around vetting books.
Yeah, which essentially meant that over an 8-hour workday, I spent at least half of it reading. It was fabulous.
I mean, that's not too dissimilar to the job that we both started reading comics in, because we were reading comics in between calls that we should have been.
Yeah, we were sat in a call centre just reading comic books. But no, I got so much reading done, and then I stopped being a librarian and struggled to read because suddenly it wasn't built into my routine anymore. So now I have to be really boundaried and like give my girlfriend my phone so that I can read a book.
Reading really is it's a muscle that you have to exercise or keep in shape to be able to jump in and out, don't you?
It's the thinking man's hobby.
Yeah,
it takes some discipline.
Reading is my aspirational hobby. I always say I'm about to do it, and that was like 5 years ago, and I still haven't. I've got a book ready to go that I read the first chapter of, and then I just haven't picked it up again yet.
I have bought more signed first editions this year than I've read books.
Right. So you own more books than you've read.
Oh, as does every bibliophile.
So you're essentially the average gamer on Steam.
Oh, yeah, no, we have a lot in common. There's something really charming about a signed first edition. And then actually sitting down to read in 2022 is very difficult because every couple of days we have a new prime minister.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, just generally.
There's like a new once in a lifetime event in history that occurs on a weekly basis at the moment. It's terrifying.
I use that to get out of doing like chores for my own benefit. I'm like, well, the world's ending. Who cares if it's dusty? Like, global warming is going to take all of us. And if you were here for more life-affirming messages, then you've come to the right place.
Absolutely. So what are we talking about this week?
Well, firstly, I mean, you haven't asked me how I'm doing or how I've been. Or
how are you,
been
Ryan?
Well, now that you mention it. No, the only reason I say that is because what I did last week was I took a day trip to London, and one of the places I visited was the Cartoon Museum. And specifically, it's cartoons as in their first iteration, which was like single panel cartoons, like you see in newspapers and stuff now.
Yeah. Inkies.
Yes, and the reason it's great. It's a great museum. It's in London, near Soho, Chinatown, that kind of area. Highly recommend going. It's literally like you do it in an hour, so it's a lot of fun. Very interesting. The one of the key takeaways I got was the actual, as we know it, the cartoon, the word literally started because there were these single frame illustrations, single panel illustrations, maybe with a caption, that basically became popular in the late 1700s. And the reason they did, so obviously there was illustration, there was painting, there was all of that, for centuries beforehand. But the cartoon came about specifically because they were ways to get across satirical political messages.
Like old Punch and Judy comics.
Yeah, and that was fascinating to me because the difference between like a painting where you're just trying to get across like, here's a person in a forest and there's a cross in the background and it's probably Jesus and, all that kind of like, it's very metaphoric and that kind of thing. The satirical comics were literally trying to get across a story or a narrative in a single panel.
And it's so interesting because I studied history for a bit, and there are certain political cartoons that I've retained. There's like the political cartoon of Benjamin Disraeli at the top of the greasy pole. Has stuck with me and I've retained it, or the cartoons of Oscar Wilde around his trial against Lord Salisbury.
Was that for sodomy?
It was for he was suing Lord Salisbury for defamation of character.
I'm getting confused when Oscar Wilde, when he was in court, because he
was never in court for sodomy.
Oh, that's a misconception on my part then.
So, yeah, no, the Marquis of Salisbury. No, not Salisbury, Queensberry. He was his boyfriend's dad, Bosey's dad, and he published wrote and said some really scandalous things about Oscar, and so Oscar took him to court for defamation of character.
Were the things he said about him later turned out to be true?
They were really fucking true, yeah. It was all about him bumming his son, and if there's one thing that Oscar Wilde liked, it was a bit of bum. Bosey was a dick,
right?
But Bosey is long regarded as the reason that he aged as quickly as he did. Bosey was a bit of a bellend. Brilliant writer.
I mean, they all tend to be, don't they?
Yeah, he went on to be a prolific writer and editor in his own right, did Bosey. And his dad, the Marquis of Queensberry, invented the Queensberry rules for boxing.
I see Queensberry rules. I always thought that as a joke, because I've heard that referred to like other things, like, oh, we're playing Queensberry rules as like a joke when you play like cricket or something.
Yeah, no, the Queensberry rules were the standard rules of engagement for boxing for a long time, and they were invented by Oscar Wilde's boyfriend's dad.
I mean, the more you know.
The more you know, the more useless information you have to catalogue.
There was one interesting thing in the cartoon museum was one of the earliest ones. I was just gonna say is it was really simple, like getting a message across. So the reason these earliest cartoons were political messages was because most people couldn't read, or at the very least couldn't read long form. So they could, they knew a bit, but they couldn't read like. So if you were someone who was at the time smart enough and skilled enough to write a like scathing, dissertation or something on the
pamphlet, it would have been called at the time, wouldn't it?
On the powers that be. And if most people can't read it, what's the point? But then they got illustrators would then make this single panel, and it was just obvious immediately because they could like uniforms of who it was, and that got across messages. One of the earliest ones was there was one where the Queen's Guard or someone would like march through the streets and basically were like absolute dicks to people when they were doing it. And then because
nothing much has changed, does it?
No, not at all. But then what's interesting is as people were then like complaining about them being dicks, the government at the time, or probably the crown or whoever was in charge at the time, basically put out like show some respect to these guys when they're walking through the streets kind of thing. So one of the earliest, definitely wasn't the first, but it was one of the earliest popular ones, was a cartoon of those soldiers walking through the streets, very proud and upright, walking over peasants. Like stepping on them. So it was a very quick, like you didn't need to read. It was just very obvious, like, here's what we think of these people. They spread it around and people got the message immediately. And that was what gave birth literally to the word cartoon, was those kinds of things.
And that was 17th century, so 1600s.
Late 1700s. So like 1780 onwards.
So the 18th century going into the 19th century.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about the Queen's Guard, it's really fascinating that there are still memes about the Queen's Guard. And TikTok is still largely obsessed with the goings-on of the Queen's Guard.
Well, Americans are, aren't they? Because we're over it. We're like, that's just their job.
Yeah, I suppose an English person touristing in London probably isn't going to go and look at the Queen's Guard because we've seen it.
Yeah, and we're used to grown men being stoic to a fault where they won't move. That's the British way.
That's so true, isn't it?
Over a certain age, if you're not actively doing anything, you're just standing still, staring into space. That's like your hobby, I also I went to a comic book shop in London, one of the ones I hadn't been to already. And I tell you what, we're not going to run out of content for this. I felt like walls to walls of comics. And I was like, we're not going to run.
I often think of those kind of shops because I have that same experience in like secondhand bookshops. Do you sometimes think that it's not actually a business venture, but just an extension of one guy's collection?
Oh, well, if it was a collection, they probably wouldn't have it out where people could get their grimy fingers on it,
Yeah, but you have to be able to justify it to the missus, don't you?
Yeah. But there's like, oh, can I buy this one? No, that one's not for sale. It's my only copy.
I was in a bookshop the other day and I saw a beautiful signed first edition of a Terry Pratchett novel. And it was like on a top shelf, unobtainably high. Like, my partner's 5'11". She's a really tall woman and she couldn't reach it. And so we had to get the guy to get it down. And I was like, how much is that then, mate? And he went, oh, I don't know. I don't really want to.
I don't know if I could part with
Yeah. It's in your shop.
You own a bookshop. It's a book.
But I genuinely have those conversations with booksellers sometimes where I have to negotiate with them for them to sell the book to me at all. And oftentimes it'll be like, I'll have to justify that I'm a genuine like enthusiast of the author, and that I know enough about Pratchett, for instance, to be the new custodian of this thing.
But what are they afraid? What's the opposite? Is someone going to be like, oh, can I buy that book? And then they take like a TikTok with it and then just set it on fire when they're done.
Well, this is it. Like, I don't know what they're expecting me to do with it, but on that occasion, I had to convince the guy that I'd been a librarian and was a huge Pratchett fan and was currently collecting first editions of Pratchett.
Sir, I assure you, I was a librarian. It's like, yeah, that's what they all say. Get out.
It was mental. He was a really nice bloke, but he did not want to sell me that book.
Who would lie about being a librarian? Who would boast about
I'm from the librarian, sir.
Yeah, that's what they all say. I tell you what, you remind me as well, when I was walking through London, there were a couple of like comic book things around, like the museum, the shop, and there was a couple in between. And
did you have a comic-y day? It sounds like you had quite a comic-y day.
I picked out things because we're doing this, so I was kind of like, I suppose I should do things that, you know,
that's kind of
give
cool.
me credentials as the comic expert, which I claim not to be. But I walked past, this gives you a good idea. I walked past one shop and I looked at the window and I was like, oh, that's another comic book shop. It's like, but they're like big, they're like larger comics. They're like quite thick. They're like graphic novel collection or something. It was books. It was just books. It was a bookshop. But they were hardcovers. But my mind went straight to graphic novel volumes than
so good.
just books.
Yeah,
like,
they were just cookbooks.
I don't remind myself, like, oh yeah, they sometimes do words without the pictures. Like an idiot.
These comic books missing all the pictures.
So if you're listening to this podcast, you are like me. You forget the existence of books sometimes.
Can we also? I would like to introduce a very, very brief segment into the podcast. Just to make me accountable for reading, which is the What is Jamie Reading section.
Okay.
For any of our more literate-minded...
Can we call it, What You Reading, you so-called librarian? And it's just that every week.
Either that or the pictures are missing from Jamie's books.
Yeah, he's got comics without pictures.
Yeah.
Comics, the section.
Do you know what? Because you're letting me do this, you can name it.
Yeah, I think comics without pictures or comics with too many words. One of those. Yeah.
So I'm going to get it.
Okay. I'll fill time. I tell you what, very quickly, before we do that, I will fill a little time. You can have a stroll through your book there.
Yeah.
A little bit of news for the first time. Actually,
should we do news?
We're actually it's sad news, unfortunately, so we can't get too excited about it.
Oh no, I don't know what this is.
It's
Did somebody die?
Yes, someone did die.
No.
So trying to sound too happy about it. It was illustrator, famous illustrator Kevin O'Neill, who died at 69 last week. He had cancer for a while, but he was a big impact in the comics industry, and his work has definitely influenced people. Biggest title that he's known to? Biggest title that he's known to is he was the co-creator of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is not only one of my favorites, it's very good. He'd done other stuff as well, martial law, cinema Purgatorio, I think I've pronounced correctly, and he did a bunch of other stuff outside of comics as well. It's a great man, but just by the work alone. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I mentioned this specifically because any man who could put up with working with Alan Moore must be something special.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it's becoming a running theme where we shit on Alan Moore every episode, who is himself a fantastic writer, probably a very nice person by all means.
Like one of my favourite comic book writers of all time,
Yes.
but there's just something about him when I see him in that advert.
He's such an old curmudgeon who thinks he's a wizard, and that's just such an easy... But he's great as well. And Alan,
he's like a shit Terry Pratchett.
Alan, if you're listening, we do love you. Open invitation to come on the podcast and tell us how wrong we are.
Oh my God, I would love to have a conversation with Alan Moore. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, give it a couple more episodes, get us established, but
A couple more episodes.
It can happen any day. So this now is the new section of the show where it's Jamie tells us about his comic book without pictures. I'm probably getting a less wordy title.
So I'm going to keep it brief. It's by a guy called Laurens van der Post.
Sounds made up, but go on.
And it's called The Seed and the Sower. And it is described as a compelling story of captors and captives in a Japanese POW camp. What's interesting about this is that it was filmed as a not major motion picture by the title of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, starring the late, great David Bowie.
David Bowie.
David Bowie.
David Bowie.
Oh, no.
I know.
Are you not one of those, are you?
I say it for the laugh.
Okay, that's okay then.
I think it's our generation was slightly influenced by that French joke where Ross gets the earpiece. He goes, "Who am I? David Bowie." It's like, is that what he does? Like, I don't know who he is.
But yeah, it's it's a really wonderful story about a South African soldier imprisoned in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. It's written, I'm assuming, shortly after the Second World War. And it's a really interesting deep dive into Japanese culture and the mindset of the Japanese soldier, and also just some really fabulously written characters. But I would recommend watching the film first, because then when you read it, you get to picture David Bowie.
I mean, some people know David Bowie enough that you can, like, I could picture him right now, and I'm not even a big fan.
No, he's fabulous in it.
Okay, it's a very specific performance.
Yeah,
he was
really
an underrated
good
actor for everything else he did.
Fucking incredible actor.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I love Labyrinth, but Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is like my favorite Bowie film. Suddenly, I watched it really recently, and the book is excellent. And if you get the Penguin edition, like the old 80s paperback, it's a recover for the film, and it has David Bowie on the front looking really handsome. He
does look very, I can vouch for the listeners, he does look very handsome.
Doesn't
he? It kind of looks a bit like Steve McQueen, blonde.
Steve McQueen playing Jesus.
Yeah, but blonde, short blonde hair.
Yeah,
but he's doing the pose.
Steve McQueen is a sexy military Jesus.
Yes.
But that's it. Yeah, I just want to hold myself accountable.
That's good.
For reading.
I will hold you accountable. I'll tell you what, we'll institute some kind of reward punishment system. So like the reward is you get to talk about a book for a small section. The punishment we'll decide later. I'm thinking something like physically painful.
Okay, that's fine. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, well, we'll work that out because but recurring. Oh, I mean, the punishment could be even just me being like, should have read your book, because the pain from that alone.
Yeah, that's enough for someone like me.
I'll tell you what, I'll do a quick one as well. This will be Ryan's section of pictures that moved so fast they formed a moving image section, like a flip book, but on a television.
Like a flip book. As if they don't know what TV is.
I mean, also as a film, technically, but still, yeah.
Okay. For the listener, I'm receding further into my blanket as Ryan is saying
I can barely see him. So I normally watch something like every week, like a single thing. More of a TV person myself, but I'll watch a film when one piques my interest, and you kind of set the bar, like, was it the brow high with your thing, because it's
set
all
the brow quite high.
The brow is quite high. I'm gonna lower it now, but in a good way, a very good way. I watched Weird, the Al Yankovic story, which is
I heard that was being made.
It's now out. It just came out.
The biopic, isn't it?
Yes,
it's amazing.
It's a Weird Al biopic, and it's quite funny.
It would need to be.
Yes, and it is a parody of biopics. But the great thing is that it's a parody biopic about a man who has made his living and fame making parodies.
I thought it was just going to be a straight biopic.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it is as well, because there are true things in it. So, like, Weird Al said this in an interview. One of the bits in there is when he wants to record his first song, him and his friends, they're like, we can't afford a studio, man. Like, how are we going to do this? Like, back in, like, the 80s, early 80s, I think. And they're like, I tell you what, the acoustics in the bathroom on the campus are pretty good, so we could go there. And they just set up recording in there and recording there. And Weird Al's like, yeah, that part's true, actually. Like, that actually happened. That's not a joke.
Oh, I'm going to watch it. That sounds great.
And the inspiration for the jokes for the songs are so good because everyone knows. Like if you're watching the Weird Al film, you know Weird Al songs. Exactly. But the inspiration part, because you know when it's about to happen, and they set them up so heavily handed that it's funny.
Yeah.
So like one point he's like, "Yeah, I just want to make songs. I want to take existing songs and change the words in them and make them something else." And they're like, "We believe in you, man." Like his friends. They're like, "Yeah, but how about you make us some sandwiches first?" And they're like, sandwiches. He's like, "All right, guys, I'll make you sandwiches." And then he goes and gets like a big pack of bologna out. And he's like looking at the bologna. He's like, "Steve, is this your bologna?" He's like, "Yeah, that's my bologna." He's like, "Your bologna?" He's like, "My bologna." He's like, "Okay." And then on the song, it's like, "My Sharona." And he's like looking at the bologna and like looking at the radio, looking at the bologna, looking at the radio. And you're like, just get on with it. And that's the joke in the time. So,
oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to have to watch it.
Yeah. Highly recommend. Lots of cameos. Evan Rachel Wood is in it playing Madonna from Westworld.
Hey.
So it's like Weird Al plays a producer who tells him there's no business in parody songs.
Okay.
So yeah, highly recommend.
Should we have a rating system?
Yeah, I'll give it. What's it out of?
Should it be a 5 rating system, but 5 somethings out of a something?
Yeah, that's fine. I would give this 5 accordions. Not funny enough.
This is all staying in.
Oh yes, it has to. Yeah, the dead air. All the dead air has to stay in.
Ooh.
I mean, if it's contextually funny, then we'll put it in.
If it's contextually funny,
I would give.
what we're banking on.
I'll give Weird, the Alan Yankovic story, 5 parody stars. So they're not real stars, but they're parodies of stars.
Okay.
So technically, it's got 0, but it's got 5 parody stars.
I'm going to give The Seed and the Sower, having read the first 100 and something pages,
5 Japanese prisoners of war.
3 starving prisoners of wars relieved from the camp, 2 still dead.
Okay, that makes sense. Because if you don't get all 5, then 2 have to die.
Exactly, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's it. So should we start?
Yes.
Should we actually talk about the thing?
Yeah, but this is a preamble. This is
We're having a little fun. We're just kind of getting into it.
You're coming back, sitting down with friends, but you're not actually here because
nice.
you're listening somewhere else. But you're back with the friends.
You're finding out what we're doing, what we've been up to, what we're reading, what we're watching. It's
Exactly.
nice.
And we haven't spoken at all between episodes. It's like,
No, we haven't been out together.
I got
at all.
here and set up. Just total silence. You tried talking to me at one point. I was like, no, it's a podcast.
Save it for the podcast.
Exactly.
I'm going to very quickly while you...
So this week, we're going to be doing something a little differently from the only 2 episodes we've done previously, but
2 or 3?
2. This is number 3.
Okay.
Yeah, we did the mission statement one that may or may not be released further down the line.
Yeah, no,
this
it's
is
3, isn't it?
third official episode. But something slightly different because we're doing a comic series that came out and started this year. It's only got 7 issues out, and it's called Rogue Sun, which I think doing ones that come out...
I just got the pun.
You're like, oh, what is that? There's a wrestling podcast I listen to. There's a character called, The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Everyone knows The Undertaker. He has a manager, or he used to before he died, but he had a manager whose name was Paul Bearer. And one of the podcasts I listened to, the guy is literally like, he was like in his like late 20s when he was like, wait, Paul Bearer. Oh.
Yeah, I just got the pun.
Yeah, Rogue Sun. Yeah.
I just got it.
Not a subtle pun, but it's
not a subtle book.
No. And this was going to be one of my points of it, but we'll get into it. What I will do very quickly first is I've got the blurb from it. And
we can make up our own.
Well, no. I was going to do something. I was going to read the blurb in like voiceover trailer style.
Oh, okay.
Or
you can do
attempt
that.
to at least.
That's fun.
So,
you can do that.
So Rogue Sun is a comic issue series being released right now, and the blurb is Rogue Sun. Yesterday, New Orleans' greatest hero, Rogue Sun, was murdered. Today, rebellious teenager Dylan Siegel discovers that Rogue Sun was his estranged father, Marcus, and that he's inherited his father's mantle. Tasked with protecting our world from the forces of the supernatural and solving his father's murder, Dylan will be forced to come to terms with the man he spent the majority of his life hating. From acclaimed writer Ryan Parrott, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Dead Day, and rising star artist Abel, One name, Abel. That's he made Harley Quinn in Crimes of Passion.
Oh.
Yeah. Comes a supernatural murder mystery that explores the complicated bond between father and son and cements itself squarely in a corner of the Image Comics superhero universe.
Well done.
Thank you. I hope if anyone's listening, I could be casted for children's birthdays.
It was written by a guy who wrote for Power Rangers.
Apparently, yeah, that's what the wiki
the
is.
Western adaptation?
There must be Power Rangers comics in English.
So he wrote for a Power Rangers comic.
I assume from reading that, I assume so, yeah. Because typically they include other comic titles when talking about a new comic that the person's doing.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I thought it was going to be some random Korean dude who'd written the original Power Rangers.
Oh, the original Power Rangers, definitely. No, they've like re-released a modern title and they've picked him up for that, so... Yeah, Power Rangers is a weird one. But we're not talking about Power Rangers. We're talking about Rogue Sun, and it's not on the nose, or too on the nose parody name title.
Yeah, it's I know you have a list and you want to kind of go through the list.
Not necessarily. It's a bit of a different one because it's a new one with not much.
Yeah.
So I think if we're doing any kind of structure, let's do just a little bit about what it's like without spoiling any of it. So just like, the general themes and like quality and that kind of stuff. A little bit of that, and then we'll just get into the first 6 issues because you've only read the first 6.
Yeah.
I might mention a little bit on the 7th, but the first 6 is its first story arc. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
It's about parenthood and magic.
Yes, and you tell from the blurb immediately it's about a complicated relationship between the main character and the father.
Were you getting a lot of Tony Stark and Peter Parker?
No, but only because that's kind of one of the later versions of something I've seen. There's been done quite a bit in comics.
Times,
yeah, I mean in literature especially. Comics has quite a few characters that are very father-based.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where we left off. We had a slight technical issue.
Microphone fell off.
The microphone fell off through completely unknown reasons, possibly a ghost, for all we know. I was saying about... the listeners going to be like, I know exactly what you're talking about. It was a second ago.
We were talking about the
father-son relationship. Yes,
in comic books.
Yes, there's a lot of that, especially in superheroes, because it's one of the, just superheroes, they've done so much. They've done every topic like 100 times at least. Biggest ones are from what I can remember, Star-Lord and his dad, they've done in the MCU, but that was big in the comics. There's the new character Nova, the original Nova. His son took the mantle, so there's that father-son here, which is very reminiscent of this because the characters have a thing that activates. In the Nova core, they have a helmet, whereas this is the stone that turns you into the superhero.
There's a MacGuffin.
Yes.
There's a MacGuffin that turns them into the superhero.
Yes, and one of the things that, I don't think this is a spoiler, but one of the things that very much interested me about this story and its version of this, old trope is most of those other ones, the dad has been gone for some reason, and it just turns out immediately that they were gone for noble reasons. Like they were captured or they had to go and fight, this war or
Marcus is just a douche.
Exactly, and I like that about this. I like that it's different because, as I said, all the other ones are noble, and this one's like, no, he's a shitty guy. He's an absent father. He's a hero, and he saves people every day, but he just bailed. He didn't have to.
Yeah, he chose to bail.
I'm scared that in there's a flashback bit which kind of delves into that previous relationship. I'm scared they're going to give him a noble reason or a semi-noble reason because he has a bit of that kind of like, I didn't want to leave you, but I had to kind of thing. And I'm like, I want you to still be that shitty person, that shitty absent father who left through choice.
So something that, because I read it all in half an hour before we started recording.
Yeah.
And so I absorbed the arc in one go. Something that struck me about it when consumed in that way, and I don't know if you would have had the same sense of it if you'd bought each issue over 6 months. But I got a sense that the writers were really keen to paint these characters in very defined broad strokes so that they could very quickly subvert their characterizations.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We're introduced to Dylan as a bully and then introduced to him as a hero within 2 to 3 pages, which is a very, very prompt establishing of a character trait and then a subversion of that character trait. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they were going to try and introduce some nobility into Marcus's character, just by the way they've been writing it and how quickly they're trying to set these characters up and then subvert them.
Well, I'm hoping that the subversion doesn't... I hope the subversions are an added layer and not just replacing what's interesting. So I don't want Dylan to... So Dylan starts as a bully. He's making, smaller, weaker kids do his homework for him.
Yeah.
One of them he seems to be kind of still pally with, still kind of friendly with. There's like a quid pro quo, but then it's like, is this kid just pally because he doesn't want to get beaten the shit out of? And how noble is that? But they're setting him up like a bully, which again, I really liked because again, it subverts the expectations of other comics. It's most of the time like any character, most notably someone like Peter Parker, Spider-Man.
I was about to say Peter Parker or Miles Morales.
Yep. No, Miles Morales has his mum and dad still around.
Oh, I was talking about them being a bully.
Oh, well, what I meant, so what the point I was going to get at was you have these characters who either have childhood tragedies or they have missing parents or for whatever reasons, and they still turn out absolutely amazing. Like pure of heart, like they've been through troubles. Why would they take out on someone else because they're so pure? Whereas Dylan has had a missing father for 15 years.
And he acts like it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I liked. I was like, this is interesting. I knew he was going to get powers and become a superhero. So I'm like, I want to see what this effect has on him.
Yeah.
And you see it, he doesn't just suddenly become good. He's reconciling these learned negative qualities that he just can't help but do because of his upbringing. And but at the same time, he wants to be a superhero and save people. But I don't think that's out of nobility. I think that is like the aspirational, like we'd all like to be a superhero and save the day and be cheered, that kind of thing. He's not quite at the level of like doing it out of just the goodness of his heart.
No, and he shares a lot of his dad's character flaws in as much as really early on we see him rooting through an empty fridge. And then as soon as he discovers he has the powers, his reasoning is, well, a superhero is always going to be all right. And his dad, his mum kind of makes it quite clear that his dad was taking what he felt were his dues financially. When he prevented a bank robbery, he'd skim a little bit off the top.
Yeah.
And Dylan seems to share those qualities with his dad. Marcus and Dylan, I would have to double take sometimes to see which one was speaking, because they were so similar in the way they were characterized.
And they intentionally look very similar as well.
Don't they?
Yeah, and there's so many little interesting things there. I like you say, they established the characters very early on, and it's not subtle at all with the messaging or the themes or any of that. I think that's a fault of the medium, the monthly release.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a fault either. I think
it comes off less subtle, but as you say, the advantage is that they get to things quicker as well.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's the other mediums would maybe go at it a little more subtly, build things up a little more, whereas this one has to be like, he's a bully and now he's a superhero and his dad's dead and, he hates his dad, and like they like rush through all this.
Yeah.
But I think that's because with the monthly release, issue 1 has to be like, get on board. This is what we're doing. This is why it's interesting. Whereas like a film or a TV show, they can be a bit more slow build and
we often, I think when I reread Why, I got the same sense as well, which is actually that first arc of a new book is over and done with very quickly because they're trying to get that immediate buy-in, particularly something like this, which is a completely new character. It's a completely new book. This isn't just the latest Spider-Man or Batman reboot. This is somebody's project that they're trying to invest you in on a monthly basis. And so they needed to give you an engaging story over the first half a year that you're reading it. And so actually what took me half an hour took most people most of 2022. And so it needs to punch that hard and it needs to travel that quickly, doesn't it? Just for the medium to work.
I think you notice a similarity between that and Why, because they're both monthly releases. So
Yeah, this is what I mean. And they're both on Image, aren't they?
Why had to do bloody the outbreak and the killing of all men, like in issue 1, to be like, this is what's happening, this is why it's important, get on board. But there
was no and they made use of exposition to set the scene, which because they placed it in a really famous location.
Well, that's going to be one of my points, was that New Orleans, it was interesting to see that's rare for a superhero comic to set itself somewhere like that.
But they've not made any use of it being in New Orleans.
Not since no, they do a bit in the first issue, and then it's just we moved on. The
fact that it's in New Orleans is revealed only through exposition, and I feel like New Orleans is so unique culturally and architecturally that actually, if you were going to set a comic book there, you could use the visual language of New Orleans to really set that scene. Whereas reading the book, it just looked like Middle America.
Yeah, once you got past the first issue where they were like, look, we're in New Orleans, then it was like anywhere USA.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's because the first issue was in New Orleans and the rest isn't.
No, it must all be. I think it's all in.
I don't know. I don't have a strong sense of setting.
Yeah, no, you're all right. You're all right.
I don't have a strong sense of setting from it. And I think that's really interesting because they chose such a strong setting, and they chose a setting which, unlike any other place in America, would have this really palatable, noticeable effect on the action of the story. Because New Orleans is so different culturally to the rest of America, that it just seemed like an odd choice that they've not followed through on. Like, it's a cool place to set a comic, and New Orleans has this... There's a visual language they could have been drawing on that they haven't drawn on, and I find that really interesting.
Hopefully it's a case of something they'll revisit further down, or as long as they go.
When they've got a bit more space.
Yes, and I think there probably was an importance to be like, right, we've set the scene, we've introduced characters, we need to do the story now and get it done, and so we can then go past it. What was interesting, I think, as well, is that it does contain a lot of superhero tropes.
Oh, and everywhere.
There's definitely there's a good balance, I think. And I wonder, so would you say you're not as superhero literate, for lack of a better word, not as superhero literate as like other, like as well, especially as me? Did you notice like those superhero tropes, or could you tell them not being used to them as much?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I noticed them. They're hard to miss, aren't they?
Well, what I was going to say, I thought it was a good balance between having those and for anyone who's someone who might come in not knowing them, but you still get the story. It still explains every beat. But like me, I'm thinking like, oh, it's like Green Lantern, or it's like, you know, God damn it. Nova. It's Nova, and it's had like an item that gives you powers and transforms you, and it can be passed on to other people and all that. What's also interesting as well is I didn't realize this until after I read the 6 issues. This is actually part of a larger universe. So,
oh, well, that changes things.
Image Comics is releasing superhero type, or essentially superhero stories that are being listed under the Massive Verse. I have no idea why it's called that, because I've only read Rogue Sun, and they haven't obviously explained anything about that yet.
When did they start that?
Apparently back in February 2021. So there's been other ones that have been going, and now Rogue Sun's another one that's presumably going to be a part of, you know, they're going to have their own kind of Avengers, Justice League style, you know, team ups or something like that. And it is going to be interesting. Now, I'm literally having this thought now. It's going to be interesting seeing Dylan interact with other superheroes, because he's had a very different way of, you know, getting to that life.
Yeah, and he's not particularly powerful.
Well, hopefully his powers will grow, because like his dad was saying, it's like, I need to teach you everything. And Dylan's like, whatever.
I don't give a fuck that.
No. I think we can get into the spoilers of the first 6 issues.
Oh, yeah, we have to.
Yeah. But we'll say, if you want to read this comic and you don't want it spoiled, highly recommend. Highly recommend. For me, as someone who's a superhero fan, it's an interesting take. It's interesting enough to stand on its own without just being like a superhero parody. Got interesting themes. Again, not subtle, but still makes for very interesting conflict, good characters, good development.
I spent a fun enough half hour with it.
Exactly. And it's definitely worth reading for the sake of how short a run it is now, and how little information you need beforehand. It's not like jumping into Spider-Man or Batman.
And I think this is what charmed me about it, is that it's a superhero comic that nobody's going to go, oh, well, technically in 1973 there was a precedent whereby Dylan can only use his Blackfire if he's slightly upset. It doesn't. It's a comic. It's a super. If you want that itch scratched, but you don't want to have to sift through 70 years worth of lore, it's an interesting choice because there's 7 issues of it so far, and you can get in at the ground floor and just enjoy it for what it is, which is a camp superhero story.
And also, if you're not that bothered about the superhero aspect, I will say it's a pretty good story because it's also just about shitty people who are kind of making the best of things. And
yeah, it's a very familiar story of absentee fathers.
Yeah.
And it, so I think we just need to spoil it.
Yeah. One thing I will start off with in my notes is something I noticed, which I think you'll get a kick out of as well. Image Comics, who publish this, I think we're going to be revisiting them a lot because they do not only superhero stuff, but they mostly do non-superhero stuff. Yeah. And have a high bar of quality. They make a lot of comics, but they do hit the peaks on like some of the best comics. So we're going to be hitting them a lot. But what I noticed on these issues, on the front of them, is that Image is 30 years old this year.
That's crazy, isn't it?
I know, we're the same age as a publication that's been going, well, since we were born. So I thought that was interesting.
And we think of Image as the new kids on the...
Yeah. I mean, compared to bloody Marvel and DC, they relatively still are.
Going since the 40s or 50s, haven't they?
Yeah. Marvel, DC for sure, yeah. Under different names, but essentially, yes. So I thought that was good. Yeah, we're definitely into spoilers now. We're into everything. Some of my notes I've already covered, like... I did note that in one of the post-issue writings from the writer, his parents are divorced. And I think that plays a heavy influence on this story.
Yeah, doesn't it just?
Especially when one of the biggest spoilers that we'll give away now for the 5th issue is at the very beginning, Marcus, the dad, is killed by a supervillain who seemingly comes out of nowhere, kills him, and fucks off. It's revealed in issue 5 that the supervillain is in fact Dylan's mum.
It's fucking straight out of the Greek mythology. Your mum kills your dad.
Exactly.
Like, it is just right in there. It's Gaia, the Earth Mother, killing her husband. Yeah, it's just straight out of Greek mythology, isn't it?
And one part I thought was particularly great. But the other thing is that the dad, who is dead, his soul has been entwined with the sunstone that makes the powers.
Let's not. I don't. Right, I'm not gonna dignify this by trying to wrestle with its language. His dad is force ghosting.
Yes, essentially.
His dad is force ghosting when he's in the suit.
But it's an interesting one because the force ghosting, that's like anywhere and everywhere. This is like, oh, you want this sunstone, you want this powers. Oh, yes, please. Well, you have to speak to your dead dad who you hate. Like, it's that combination that they're so linked. Like, if you want to do this thing, you have to speak to this person who you hate. So the dad is there, he's talking to him, and he's just a shithead, which is great. Because, again, he's not... It's not like, oh, I actually had to leave to save the universe. It's like,
there is a point
shitty.
where he admits that he gave Dylan the suit purely because he didn't want to put his real son at risk. So
one of the biggest points as well is the dad basically told Dylan's mum, oh, I can't have a family, or you guys won't be safe, whatever. And then years later, it's like, oh no, I married some other bird and we've had kids now.
Yeah.
So he has other kids who he considers real kids, and they are younger than Dylan, and that must play a part. Like when he's like, he basically says to Dylan, all right, fine, I gave it to you because I didn't want to give it to my real kids because I didn't want to put them in danger, which is shitty and possibly true, but also the kids are younger. Like, what are they going to do?
Dylan's not old himself. Dylan's like 17.
He's 17, but the kids, like the oldest is the girl who's maybe, like 12, 13 maybe?
Yeah.
So, if your only choices are a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old, I'm probably going to give it to a 17-year-old regardless.
Are we positioning ourselves for American audiences or British audiences?
We're global, baby. We're Bulldog.
So we're allowed to be British.
We're Mr. Worldwide.
So we're allowed to be British here.
Yeah, be British.
The sister's a devious cunt.
Well, she is, but she explains her actions. She's trying to. So the other family are not only aware of Marcus's superheroes, they know everything. Like, he's been fully open with them. They know everything, unlike Dylan did. And the other family, they know he's in the suit and still kind of alive, but like the other mum, who seems to be decent, we will see as it goes. She's like, nah, he's dead. Like, whatever that thing is in the suit, he's dead. And Dylan's like, too right. But the kids, they know he's alive. I like there's interactions where Dylan was it like the sister, she's like, oh, is he there? And the dad's like, tell her I'm not here.
And then he says, like, Dad tells me to tell you he's not here.
Exactly. But there's also bits where Dylan relays better messages to the son.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of things about, did the son do this or that? Did the daughter do this or that? And the daughter, again, she explains her actions. She thinks she's saving her dad from the suit.
She still sets a soul-eating demon on Dylan.
Yeah. But then he's not that bothered.
That is fuckery of the highest order.
Yeah. But one of the part I was going to say I really liked was the mid-fight argument between Dylan, his supervillain mum, and his dead dad. Yeah. And it literally reads like divorcing parents fighting over the child. And not just fighting over him, but like trying to be like, no, I'm the good parent, they're the shithead. And like, nah, they're lying, that felt very, very real, fighting for control of the child.
And they are absolutely doing the thing that you strive not to do as a parent or a step-parent in a joint custody situation.
Yeah, 100%.
They are virtue signaling, and they are allowing their grievances to affect the child to such a degree that he's kind of in the middle of this mortal battle with this soul-eating demon, and he has to put his head in his hands and just say, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Because and I think that's I'm not a child of divorce, and neither are you, are you?
No.
We are part of the minority, I think, at this point.
These days, yes.
But I imagine that that's really consistent of a lot of people's experience of living with divorced parents.
I think I had about half of friends who had divorced parents, and they, from what little they spoke about it sometimes turned into that.
Yeah, most of my friends growing up came from one-parent families or, families with split custody of some sort.
Yeah. And
so this is a very universal experience that they're talking about.
And that's one of the reasons why I recommend in the book so much. It's hard to explain why it's good without explaining the story, but I think they do a really good job of using the superhero story as a metaphor, or whatever you'd call it, like just a vehicle for the humanistic problems that anyone can relate to. Because even if your parents didn't divorce, probably argued, and this is that similar thing, like a lot of parents who didn't even divorce might have done this similar thing to kids as well.
Yeah. But I think something that's really unique of the experience of a child of divorced parents is the parents arguing through them.
Yes.
So parents who can't be in the same space. Well, Dylan's mum and dad physically can't be in the same space because his dad doesn't exist in that temporal space anymore.
Dylan's dad is literally arguing through his son.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that children will experience that. Children will experience it where parents will try and weaponize their children, and they will go back and forth between two different family homes, and they will literally have their dad's voice in their ear.
Yep.
Mum's new boyfriend's a cunt. It will be that kind of thing. And so, I hadn't considered it that deeply when I was reading it, but that's certainly in there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it makes very good use of the supernatural setting, and there's an old saying that I quote with sci-fi, but I think it's applicable to any kind of fantasy or magic or anything. But it said good sci-fi isn't about the sci-fi; it's about using the sci-fi as a vehicle to kind of examine the human experience and the human conditions.
Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov?
I feel like it's Asimov. I could be. I'm like 2% sure on that. But yeah, and that's the same thing with superhero. You can use any kind of fantastical trope to just, self-examine, especially when you are examining your own things, and then you just project that onto like pre-existing superhero tropes or whatever. So,
yeah, I think that's what all fantasy and sci-fi really does when it's working.
Yes. One part I thought was very clever was in the first fight, Dylan's dad knows how much Dylan hates him, and he
gets him to punch him.
Knowing that the enemy is coming behind where he's standing.
And that's standard found father figure stuff. Like that moment where the found father figure will leverage a young man's rage to achieve a goal, or will trick them into achieving a certain goal. That is as old as time.
Is it still a found father if it's a previously abandoned father?
Yeah, and that's interesting. No, I would still say that Marcus is that found father figure. He's the Miyagi demonstrating to Daniel that by sweeping the floor, he's learned how to block a kick.
Yeah. There's another particular part. Again, this is like a really good using the trope for a humanistic reason. When they're talking about Dylan's dad, power of the suit is that you can recreate memories. You can literally go back into a memory, almost like a Minority Report, like walking through the hologram kind of style.
About to say. I know exactly which bit you're about to talk about.
Yeah, because you were reading and you read it out to me, and I went, I've already made a note about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he says, Dylan's like, you can do that with all memories? He's like, yeah. Like, I've got the memories, so I can walk in them. And Dylan's like, what about any memories of me? And Dad's like, no, I deleted all those. And that especially, like, it fits within the magic walking through memories part, but also it's the I moved on from you and had a new family. But condensed into this trope.
Yeah. Do you know what, though? I think if there's any moment or there's any kind of single thing that they're going to leverage to the Marcus was not an arsehole, in the direction of Marcus not being an arsehole, it would be that moment. It would be that memories were just too painful, son. Or I didn't want to give anybody an insight into who you were. Or something like that. It will be, I think that moment will be Marcus's redemption arc.
I think it'll be interesting to give Marcus some kind of reasoning, but I don't want them to give him a justifying reason. If that
you don't want him to get a redemption arc.
I don't want them to retcon his previous bad shit, because then that's what makes it interesting right now. Is he is this shit bloke, and Dylan's got to reconcile the fact that his dad did abandon him and isn't perfect, but can he move past that? Can he forgive him in any way?
So do you think there's anything because what you're talking about is them adding further actions that contextualize?
Yes, exactly.
Do you think there's anything that they could do to contextualize it that would be forgivable for him to have left him?
Yeah, this is what I was saying earlier. Is there's too many things that they could do, which I don't want them to do, because it could be, a wizard said if I didn't leave you, then he'd kill you. I'm doing a very dumb, quick version, but there's something like that, which then he goes like, see, I didn't want to leave you, and it hurt me to leave you, and I didn't want to.
Hurt me more than you, son.
Yeah, I don't want that. I want him to just be like, I didn't know if I could handle it, and I panicked and I made the wrong choice. But again, any redemption for Marcus has to come from doing stuff, later on, and obviously it's a bit difficult because of his current situation, but we know it's
him
possible.
Being a bit
dead but ghosty, and his ghost could help in some way.
Force ghosts, man. They really mess with the timeline, don't they?
Although this again, the trope does add a little bit, because it's not a force ghost like anyone could see him or can anywhere, but it's with Dylan, like stuck with it, and that feels like carrying your trauma along with you, doesn't it? So the dad's dead, but he's always with Dylan in his head because of the absence causing trauma.
Re-traumatizing.
Exactly. I also really liked that the established goal of Dylan as a character becomes getting rid of his father who abandoned him.
Yeah.
I thought the irony of that is very, very good and not subtle, but just it's a fun kind of irony of like, you've gone all the way around kind of thing.
But it's about him regaining agency.
Yes.
So he didn't get to choose when his dad left his life. And he's now not getting to choose when his dad comes back into his life. And so really you can look at it as a story about power and agency and him trying to reclaim that agency, which is what he does when he flies away.
Yes.
When they're training and he says, right, I'm done, we'll talk about this later. And he flies away and he literally just fucks off to go to school. That's him reclaiming agency. And I think that's part of the reason why that later conversation between Marcus and Dylan's mum was so powerful was because Dylan didn't have any agency there, and we've watched him struggling to reclaim that agency. And then at the point where he could have won that fight by himself, another parental figure turned up to save him. Somebody else took his agency away from him. And that's the point at which he became this really despondent, kind of dejected creature at the end of the 6th issue.
And had essentially lost both parents again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, the sense of loss there. And again, it's a loss of agency. He didn't get to decide.
Yes. I really liked that. I quite liked that Dylan's mum wasn't like a stereotypical mum of a bad child, because they're normally portrayed quite like, I've tried everything and it's not worked, and, you know, like that kind of style.
Yeah.
She's like very like, look, I've heard you've done some shit, like I'm punishing you now kind of thing. And at the time, in that moment, I was kind of like, oh, that's cool that she's like a bit more, you know, she's not taking any shit. She's obviously a good parent who's kind of struggled against the tide of absent father and everything like that. But then it does turn out later that she's not just taking no shit, she becomes supervillain.
She takes no shit.
Exactly.
I don't think she is a supervillain.
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
I'm really well, we're never going to find out. She's sealed away.
I mean, if we keep reading the series, we might. I think what it might be worth is we'll give it like a year. So there's like another good chunk. And then
we'll have a chat about it.
Yeah, we'll revisit it again.
How do you feel about the way that their management of supervillains?
I feel like the supervillains are used sparingly as plot devices, which is good.
I meant the way the characters manage them once they've caught.
Oh, yeah. So, what I was getting at was they're using the villains like...
they're all over the place, mate. There's like one every 2 issues.
Yes, but they are using a very kind of like, this is the lesson, or this is, you know, furthering the plot, blah, blah, blah. The prison, the supervillain prison is like it's a magical chandelier. It's a magical chandelier they are encased in the diamond that hangs from it. And they're sowing the seeds for a future plot of it's rehabilitation, but it might be also suffering as well.
Have you not seen Steven Universe? They've Steven Universed it.
Okay.
We haven't had to record this 3 times because I keep having coughing fits.
Didn't happen.
Steven Universe. The alien species that we kind of follow are all gems. And some of them are corrupted. And so they become monstrous. And when they catch a corrupted gem, they do exactly that to it. They encase it in a stone, they put it in a room, they are sequestered in a space. And there's kind of a bad gem rehab in the later seasons, where they form a gem society from all of these corrupted gems that they've rehabbed. And as soon as I saw that chandelier, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. They're fucking Steven Universed it.
Well, that's definitely the closest. That's definitely the closest thing to it. What I thought in superhero tropes, it reminded me a lot of Superman and the Negative Zone. So that's only for like the worst of the worst. Like, look, if you literally can't stay on this planet without killing people, then I'm putting you in the Negative Zone.
I just sequester them.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this one's definitely close to the Steven Universe you've described, for sure.
Yeah, and it's so funny because Steven Universe is so sweet and this is so serious.
Yeah. What's interesting as well is it made sense at first, and it made sense when the sister releases one of the villains. What didn't make sense to me was when the mum is like, yeah, you know, she keeps escaping. And I was like, wait, what? Like, is this secure or what? Because is this Arkham? Because if it's Arkham, then it's a revolving door. It's like one of the villains, like, I'm breaking out. It's like that. You could always do that. That's fine. Yeah. Just come back. Batman will bring you back. Don't worry about it.
I mean, it's like the Jerrys and Rick and Morty.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm leaving. You could always do that.
Yeah. You don't have to announce your departure. Yeah. So I was like, hang on. There's something here, but I wonder if that is just a random plot point about Marcus not killing, or are they actually going to
random plot?
It could be a plot hole.
Be a plot.
Yeah, but it's the writing's been good enough that I'm, in a wrestling term, willing to let it play out. I'm not quite judging it.
What's the term for it? Where it's a wrestling specific term
I mean, I know all of them, so go on.
where you suspend your disbelief for something, but you would say, I'm totally ... dotting for this.
If it's positive, yeah, you'd say you're marking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, are you really marking for this one? Are you willing to be a bit of a mark for it?
I think letting it play out is the more apt one, because letting it play out is not entirely positive. It's more like, I'm willing to extend a courtesy to not criticize it fully until I've seen a bit more. Oh yeah, but that's fine. But that's like that right now in our limited 6-issue reading.
Yeah,
it is a plot hole.
Yeah.
But it is one of those plot holes that unfortunately is too common in superheroes, like how Arkham Asylum is a plot hole because people just keep escaping.
You don't kill them. What do you do with them?
Well, yeah, you got to do something.
This is the question, isn't it?
It's the morality question that's been in so many superhero comics, and they're now doing a little bit of in this one. As
a long-term nerd fighter, I'm a big advocate for getting access to time travel and evil baby orphanaging.
Yeah. I mean, that's one philosophical debate, isn't it?
Evil baby orphanage, just perfect.
But then orphanages stereotypically aren't that great a place.
It would be a nice orphanage.
Probably create more supervillains.
Yeah, no, it would need to be a really nice orphanage. If you're putting Hitler and Mussolini and Pol Pot and Piers Morgan in one place.
But then the paradox, and I like the Piers Morgan reference, obviously, the paradox becomes, if they don't do all their evil stuff, then you never create the orphanage, which then means they do the evil stuff. Which...
Yeah, we're using Harry Potter time travel rules here. We're not using good time travel rules.
So Harry Potter's, it already happened, and you going back is already established. That's Harry Potter.
Yeah, the Harry Potter rules of time travel are that you can fuck with the timeline and everything will be okay.
No, I think I'm going to disagree. I might be wrong, but I think that the Harry Potter ones are, you already went back. So you're not changing. Yes,
some kind of destiny.
Yeah, because the bit in Harry Potter is Harry thinks he sees himself. No, he thinks he sees his dad doing the Patronus.
But it's him.
So he went back already, and then they have to go back to confirm that it happened.
So they're maintaining the timeline, not fixing it.
Yeah, they were always going to time travel, yeah.
Because I think the best time travel rules are Back to the Future.
What is Back to the Future again? Is because that is changing, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't fuck with the timeline.
Yeah. But then again, that's the problem is you would be changing it by taking them to the orphanage.
Yes. Talking about changing timelines and time travel, have you seen that they're rebooting Quantum Leap?
I did, yeah. I never saw Quantum Leap. I never got into it.
Quantum Leap is fucking brilliant.
I've heard good things.
It's excellent. And it was written... It's very prescient for what we're talking about suddenly. It was written by a married couple who divorced. And so I'm working from the assumption that one of them must have died because they could never come to an agreement about how the rights would be used for a reboot. And they would never be in the same room, but neither of them would ever give the other one the power to reboot it. So one of them must have died, and the other one's just capitalized on it and said, yep, we're making it. But it was advertised at me so heavily when I was in America that I just need to know. I just need to know.
I mean, maybe we could do a one-off special at some point
on Quantum Leap.
Yeah, let's compare the old to the new or something.
I'd be on the metro in New York, and it'd be like, mind the gap, or we should say the quantum gap. And it's like, oh fuck off.
I know the Americans went,
yeah. And me and my me and my Australian girlfriend.
You know you do it.
And my Australian girlfriend and I were just like, cunt.
We love you Americans, really.
Yeah, we love you.
Most of you.
Yeah, you're fine.
Some of you. The ones with passports. You guys are great.
Yeah, you guys are.
Or if you listen to this without a passport.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you're our favourites.
Because you are travelling in your mind.
Exactly. To this landscape of dicks heads talking about comic books.
All the way to Englandshire.
Englandshire, yes.
Englandshire.
So I think we've pretty much covered everything from the 6 issues. One thing I will say, tidbit out on, I read issue 7. And issue 7...
Hate me a word bit.
So I won't give away for anyone who might read it. They've listened to this and then they maybe want to continue because there's going to be you can tell there's going to be loads more interesting stories past this point.
Yeah.
But issue 7, what I will say is, I was surprised to find that it's a choose your own adventure
No
issue.
shit.
But not only that, it's that because it's contextually part of the story. So there's a villain who's basically kind of rewinding time or gone in a time loop.
Super cool.
So he does things and it's turn to page blur. Then you go back and forth and it breaks it in an interesting way as well.
So because that's interesting, we always have like an amount of time at the start that isn't about the topic.
Yeah.
Can next week be follow-up where we talk about that one issue?
Yeah,
because I'll catch up.
Yeah, we can.
Because that sounds fun.
Yeah. We'll tack it on the end of next week's or the start, wherever, or in the middle. Yeah, we're punk when it comes to that kind of stuff. Although I do have a strict schedule that we need to adhere to.
Structure.
Well, sometimes rules are there not just to be broken, but to be adhered to rigorously.
Ryan, I've braced routine into my life. The most magical thing.
Exactly.
It just feels wonderful.
Especially once you give up your dreams and hopes and...
Yeah, and it's just like Monday is the day I tidy the living room, and then it gets to Monday and you tidy the living room and it's like, oh, I feel good.
That dopamine rush from doing the thing that you were meant to do.
Oh, it's... yeah, and my fucking neurodivergent brain just riddled with whatever it's riddled with.
You've ticked off one of your chores.
Yeah, I know. Oh, it feels so good.
You heard it here. You heard it here first, kids. Routine is cool.
Oh, routine is the best.
So, and part of routine, something that is just sporadically going to happen in these episodes, sometimes or not, but it is a very important segment when it does happen.
These are the alternate titles.
These are Ryan's alternate titles.
Oh yeah, okay.
Bow, 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 bow. We need like a theme tune or something, like a air horn or something.
I feel like this is like what we got as the original title was an alternate title.
Yeah, well, it's a dual meaning.
It's a pun.
It's a pun, yeah. So, but these are some interesting ones, and it's not just the title; it's the concept as well. That's
okay.
That's why I haven't just got like a list of rhymes. Like it's the concept which is the good part. So first we start off with what I thought was the more difficult rhyme and the only decent one, because obviously there's one obvious half of that title to rhyme. So I thought I'd start with the other half as the difficult one. So. First one we have is Vogue Sun, and it's Madonna's son.
Okay.
It's just whatever he's up to. If he exists, I have no idea.
One minute. I'm going to pull my phone out. You can do the next one. I'm going to Google if Madonna has a son.
Okay. The next one is Rogue One, and it's just the Star Wars film.
I was about to say, it's very similar.
It's exactly that. So it's the comic, but it's just the Rogue One story. Rogue Hun, as in Attila. Because he was pretty rogue, if you think about it. Got one of the most rogue. Rogue Nun. They have a sip of wine, but it's not for communion. That was a little bit rogue.
Oh, so sorry, just
well, I'm almost at the grand finale, so if you've got the information, let's get it before.
So she has quite a few sons.
Oh, okay.
But one of them has a pretty good name. So it's Vogue One, the Rocco Ritchie story.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like pretty cool.
Well, do you know what it is? It's a perfect Stan Lee name.
Oh yeah,
Rocco Ritchie.
Yes, Guy Ritchie's son, I'm guessing.
I would assume so. Yeah,
must be. It'd be so weird if it wasn't.
Yes.
Somehow.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. He's her son with Guy Ritchie.
That's pretty cool then.
And he is fucking good looking.
Oh, he'd have to be.
Like, he's a very good-looking lad.
He looks good-looking, but in a very British way.
Like Guy Ritchie.
A bit Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
A bit, who plays Vision?
Yes, I know who you mean.
God, that's going to annoy me now. One Vision. He was in Knight's Tale.
He was excellent in A Knight's Tale as Geoffrey Chaucer.
Yes. God, that's going to bug me.
I know his name.
We all know his name, but we can't speak his name for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like a magical curse.
Yeah. No, keep going. Get
all right.
The finale.
The grand finale, and one that I was trying to avoid beforehand, but we kind of stepped over a little bit, is Rogue Pun.
Hey!
Exactly.
Ryan.
Yes.
Paul Bettany.
That's it.
And he's such a wonderful human being.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Did one of his best jokes was in the interviews for WandaVision when that was coming out, and that came out per week, so it's like 6 or 8 weeks of weekly episodes. And he said, the end of this series, I got to work with a bit of a cameo actor, and it's an actor I've respected for a long time, and I was very excited, and it was an absolute delight to work with them. I won't spoil who it is, and everyone's like, oh my God, it's going to be someone is the devil guy, that character. I can't remember his name, anyone's names. Or it's going to be Doctor Strange. He's making, or maybe it's Mr. Fantastic. Turned out it was Paul Bettany. There was two visions at the end. He was talking about himself.
That's
good.
So good.
And as soon as I realized that, I was like, you bugger, you're all right, aren't you?
By the way, like A Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger, the guy who played Robert Baratheon, whose name
I never knew his name, so he's Baratheon to me.
I fucking know his name, and Paul Bettany, all on screen at the same time. So much talent.
Yeah. And this is going to sound bad, but the woman in that was someone who became quite famous afterwards as well.
Oh, no, I don't know. Do you know what? I've often wondered. She was good, though. I don't remember her.
Yeah. And that's, we can't remember anyone's name. That's Mephisto was who I was forgetting earlier.
Mark
Mephisto.
Addy.
Who?
Mark Addy.
Is that Baratheon?
That's Robert Baratheon,
right.
Yeah.
We get
Mark
names
Addy.
eventually. It just takes us a while.
Absolutely.
So I think we've covered pretty much everything.
That was a fun episode.
Yeah. And it's good that this one was fun because it means we can do other newer titles.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
And once we get more into the swing of things, this opens up the door a bit for us doing new releases during the year, in between obviously older, more established titles, but we could do newer ones every once in a while. And at the end of the year, it means we can do our best of for that year.
We can do our yearly roundup.
Yes.
Oh my, that's going to be so good. We can do a best and worst.
Exactly. And to be honest, with the amount that we will do, like if we still do one a week, it's probably just going to be a best of, because we're not going to waste time on like bad ones that come out now. Like, because unfortunately, it does seem there are a lot of comics come out and a lot of them just don't,
hot garbage.
Well, maybe not even garbage. We don't know. But at least getting the best of gives us a lot to talk about, and we can rank them at the end of the year. I don't think we'll do it at the end of this year because it's bloody November already.
Yeah.
But end of 2023, mark your calendars. Comic Literate's top 10 awards, and we'll send a certificate in the post to the writers and the artists for one.
For a podcast with 3 listeners, both of whom are my mum,
and they're going to be like, who are these guys? Like, what's this?
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yes. Open invitation to come on the podcast, obviously, if you win the award. So, we're wrapped up here. And what will happen is we will have some socials and everything to plug at the end. There is a Comic Literate YouTube page, which I'm using for editing purposes. So that's the only one we've got so far. But there will be a TikTok. There will be I don't know why I start with TikTok. I think it's because it's the hot one, isn't it?
It's the one.
There'll be a TikTok. I'm already looking into taking isolated clips and maybe getting them animated.
We can do the one where somebody's trying to stab somebody with something and it's like people bubble, people do. I've been on TikTok recently.
I was gonna say, well, like what? I thought you were talking about something we'd done, and I was like, what is this? Was I passed down for this?
I've been on TikTok recently.
Okay, well, you know how it works, so that helps.
Yeah, it's fun.
But we'll have all the socials. I will be early next year launching a Comic Stand YouTube channel. Once the
not that you've mentioned it.
Not that I've mentioned it. I'm holding myself accountable, because if I don't do it, then people are going to be like, "Where's the channel, Ryan?"
Yeah,
so I'm holding myself accountable by continually mentioning it.
Sense.
You also have some stuff that you are doing on the side as well.
I have stuff and things. I've talked about it once before though, so I won't talk about it again.
It's a one-time opportunity. If you don't get on board, we're gone.
You have to go back to the previous episode to find it.
That's good. Get that extra list.
Stuff and things. Yes. I make stuff and things.
Exactly. But so once we have those, we'll have a nice, smoother outro that you'll be performing.
Oh yeah.
I'll give you a list. We'll give you a list. And other than that, we haven't decided what we're doing next week.
We'll do a thing.
We'll do a thing. We'll work out tomorrow, because we don't want to do a last minute read like we did this week.
Yeah, we'll do a thing.
Should we, because we keep mentioning it, should we do a Rick and Morty issue? And then we can talk about that, talk about how it compares to the TV show.
I feel like we should do something by Alan Moore.
Yeah, but that's a deep one.
I know, but we won't. The thing is, right, it's only because of the conversation we've had about Alan Moore. It's only funny if we don't do it justice at this point.
Okay, you know what we do? We can do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because it's Alan Moore and it's in honor of Kevin O'Neill. Kevin O'Neill.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, and
we'll do the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yes, and I've read it already, so I can I just have to skim it again. But it's the first volume is definitely the best that I read. I think there might be stuff afterwards, but best I read. It's what the film was based on, so we can talk about that a little bit, the differences.
I'm gonna go on that. Yeah, it sounds fun.
And more importantly, you can do your Alan Moore impression again.
Fucking Alan Moore, mate. Yeah, we'll do it. Okay, right. Bye.
All right, bye. I was applauding myself.
Yeah.
This part's staying in.
All of it. He cackling at the end.